Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hey everyone, welcome to Tales from the Fandom. We are on part 2 of our podcast episode with Rebecca Parker. This is episode 26, part 2, where we are delving into the Whedonverse. We discussed the JJ Abrams-verse TV shows and movies on part 1, which you can find on iTunes or the other podcast apps by going back and downloading it. It was released on Monday. And now you have this episode where we talk exclusively about the Whedonverse, everything Joss Whedon. Again, we did record this before the New York Comic-Con, so some of the stuff we may talk about is a little bit outdated, but not anything too bad. Also, if you could do me a favor and go on iTunes and do a review of the podcast, I would greatly appreciate it. I'm just trying to build up the audience a little bit and have the people that use iTunes able to see this podcast a little bit better than just the word of mouth that's spreading around getting listeners. Welcome to all the listeners from all around the country and enjoy this episode. Another fandom that you're into is what everyone has come to know and love as the Whedonverse, based on Joss Whedon's works like Buffy, Angel, Firefly, Dollhouse, and who knows what else.
Lots more.
So how did you get into the first one, which is really Buffy?
Yeah.
Buffy's like that main entry point for almost everyone.
Yeah, I think I was trying to think of this the other day, and it's kind of at the point where I'm getting so old that things start getting fuzzy. But I think I got in mid-season 1, which is interesting because I don't know how back then you would catch up if you missed something, but I did. And I remember I was working at Blockbuster, and I was working with someone, he's like, I think he was really into Blade, and so he was telling me about this new vampire show, and so I got into it, and I fell in love, and I was so fanish back then. I mean, I was also younger, but I mean, I remember the night that Surprise aired, right? So the 2-parter in season 2, it ends. I think they did it back-to-back nights, which was really rare for them, that they did for some reason. But they aired Surprise, and it ends where Angel runs out in the night after they've made love for the first time. And he runs out in the night, and you don't know, and he kind of screams in pain, and you don't know what happens. And I remember I ran downstairs the next day to like the TV guide or the part in the newspaper, and I looked at like the little blurb, and it says like Buffy must kill the evil Angel, and I was like, what? No! And it cracks me up that it was such a huge plot point was like spoiled in the blurb back then, because that's a thing now, but I guess it wasn't then. But I remember
back then there was hardly anything like. It is like if you're watching Star Trek, like they meet an alien race, the end.
Yeah, and I mean, the things that were considered spoilers back then, we take for granted now. It's like, if it's a new guest star, that would be a spoiler back then, but now it's just like news. So like, it was a whole different world back then. But I mean, it was just such a great show, and I mean, I spent the summer after season 2 just depressed, watching, Becoming Part 2 over and over and over, and listening to Full of Grace by Sarah McLachlan and just crying my eyes out. And it's that type of show that just had such an effect on you. And season 2 was just, especially the Angelus plot, was just brilliant. I mean, I love it. I mean, there's never going to be a show that touches it for me. And I definitely want to do a rewatch because I haven't in a while, but part of me worries that it's going to lose something so long after, and now that I'm at such a different point in my life. But I don't think anything's ever going to touch it. I mean, I used to write fan fiction. I used to make icons. I used to run message boards. I don't even remember. I did so much, and I was such a part of fandom. I went out to Los Angeles to a posting board party for the Bronze, which was the big message board for Buffy back then.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's still around too. It might be, maybe in some form.
Yeah, I don't know if I post on it. I don't post on it, but there's a Facebook community that I'm still a part of. But it's great. I got to meet so many of the celebrities on that show, and they were just all so nice. But there's just nothing like it, and I love how Joss takes all these things about growing up, and he makes these metaphors for them through monsters, and that's kind of always been the big sell for the show. but it's just so brilliant how he does it. I mean, and the writing, it's just so witty. I bow down to him. I got the chance to meet him at that party, and I vaguely remember what I said. I think I was just like, "Thank you so much." Um, but that was like highlight of my life, basically so far, meeting Joss Whedon.
That's that's awesome. I remember, I think I might have told this story already, either on this episode or a previous one, about how I got into it. And I was also working at Blockbuster, but I remember a coworker of mine talking to me about this show, and she is just like, "It's so good, you should check it out." And at that time, they had released a few of the first season
Mm-hmm.
videotapes, and I watched, and it wasn't the ones in order, mind you. They were like, some of them were out of order,
Mm.
but I still watched all three of those videotapes, and I had gotten into it. But it was right around the time that
Columbine,
uh,
right? I
Columbine,
remember you
yeah,
saying, yeah.
yep.
That was
So,
crazy. I remember when that happened, you understand to a point, especially some of and that's also where I think that what Joss writes so mirrors real life, that it felt like that's a little too close. Like he had his finger on the pulse that much. But you understand why they pulled, especially Earshot. I mean, Graduation Day Part Two, for that to be like, oh, there's, kids with weapons. Okay, but they were
mhm.
maces. I don't really get that. But with Earshot, when, who is it? Was it Xander who says like who just thinks or says like, oh, don't we all think about shooting up the whole school or something? It's like
Right.
it's just a little uncomfortable. But I remember I had a friend, and actually I think that's how I met her. I knew someone online or through a message board from Canada, and she sent me the tapes because they aired there. So I got to see those episodes before they finally aired in the U.S. And again, it
Yeah,
was that
because they
communal
aired those
feel.
during the summer.
Yeah, and it was really awkward. I mean, I guess Earshot on its own, you don't need it for the narrative of season three. But Graduation Day Part Two, I mean, to not have the season finale, that's painful. But, that's where the Buffy community banded together. And I remember Joss had that really famous quote where he said, bootleg the puppy.
Yep.
He was like, get it out there. Again, Earshot, I understand why they did that. Graduation Day Part Two, it was just a little overreaction. But they do that a lot now. Anytime things are sort of similar, they pull back. I get it, but
Yep. So, who's your favorite character in the Buffy world? Strictly Buffy speaking, since we're going to get to the rest of them.
uh, absolutely Xander. He has always been my favorite. I know on a previous episode you were talking to someone about how your opinion on Xander has changed. And I went to Comic Con, New York Comic Con, 2 years ago to a Buffy panel, and I was so shocked at the hate that Xander was getting. It really kind of made me sad. I was like, I'm still waving my little Xander flag over here. I get that he kind of is a little bit over the line with the way he talks to her, but I also think that sometimes our friends do that. That's our friends, are the ones who kind of say the stuff that maybe is a little too far but needs to be said.
Hmm.
And again, maybe if I watched it again in retrospect, because I know the whole idea of like slut shaming and things like that, or it's like it is a new term. Like we didn't think of it that way.
Right.
And so maybe he does do that with her. But I also think that sometimes that's what friends do. Friends just do that inappropriate stuff that sometimes we need to hear. So that's the way I see it. But I loved him. He had the best lines. He's just hilarious. I love, the kind of the torch he had for Buffy. Buffy Xander is, I mean, I'll always love Buffy Angel. They're kind of like soulmate type, amazing ship.
Right.
But Buffy Xander, I really wanted them to end on that. I
Oh, I was pulling for that for a long
Yeah.
time, even in the comics.
Well, in season seven, so the last season when they started, the first episode, I remember they had this very mom-dad relationship with Dawn,
Hmm.
and I was like, oh, maybe they're going to go this way. And I think that Joss had said they were considering it, and then they decided to go the Spike route, which that's a whole other story. But I was very disappointed. And then I started to read the comics, and I fell off because I've never been a big comic person. But didn't
Right.
they pair him with Dawn, from what I heard?
They did pair him with Dawn, and that's a whole different
Nothing
story.
against Dawn. It's just you can never come back from you dated the girl's sister.
Right. And there was even a part in the comic, which, I'm going to spoil you
Go ahead.
because it's been a couple years
Yeah, I
now,
think that ship has sailed.
where Buffy goes to Xander and is like, "Hey, let's have a relationship." And he's kind of like, No. I mean, that's pretty much come and gone, and I'm kind of seeing your sister now.
Yeah.
And because she had also Buffy's character had explored her sexuality by dating another Slayer
Hmm.
for a while, or at least sleeping with one. And then her relationship has changed throughout the, like, I think they're on season 10 now of comics. So she's definitely had her share of different relationships. She's back currently with Spike,
Ugh,
I think,
ugh.
or they broke up again. I'm not too sure.
That's why it's like with the comics. I think at a certain point, I was like, you like to leave it to your imagination of where the characters went instead of
Hmm.
having this like it's canon because it's written by the same people. But then you have to like, oh, okay, Giles died, right? Like, no,
Right,
Giles.
Giles died, but then he came
Oh,
back. So
okay, I did not know that. I'm like, no, Giles never
he
dies.
he came back in pint-sized kid form.
Oh, yeah, I'm kind of glad I kind of stopped the comics, but I'm sure they're good. Again, I've never really been a comic person, so it's sort of taking it to a place where it's not my thing.
It's a place where you don't go.
Yeah, and nothing against them. It's just, I don't know, never been my thing. And like I said, I can kind of imagine this world where, whatever happened, that's where sometimes it's like good to just leave it be and to not pick it
Hmm.
back up because maybe you're not happy where it's going to go. And, so that was me with Buffy. But, I don't know, just I love it. I mean, I know Xander used to be one of your favorite
Z-
characters, but
yeah, Xander's definitely like up there. I mean, it's Xander, Willow, Tara, Anya. Those are like the core four that I
mm,
really enjoy because I've never been a main character person, so I've never really gravitated towards
I
Buffy.
know I've never heard of someone being their favorite character was Buffy. I mean, she's great, but I think that's again, it speaks to the show that all the side characters are really where it's at. I mean, the Scooby Gang, come on,
Hmm.
even Cordelia. I mean, I know that she that straddles the line with Angel, but she was great. Um,
Yeah.
and they had some awesome villains on the show.
Oh, definitely, definitely. The villains made it, except for season 4,
Oh, the Initiative.
the Initiative, which I read somewhere. I can't remember how long ago I read it, but they had to change the storyline because the person that was playing Professor Walsh, I believe,
Yes.
like quit or didn't like what her character was going to eventually do,
Mm.
and so they had to change the
Oh, to
storyline.
Adam.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I forget the actress' name. It's Maggie something, but she's very like she does a lot of movies and independent films, and it's kind of was a little out of her lane for her to be on a show like Buffy. So I could see that. But that kind of stinks that an actor signs on for something and they have to change the
yeah,
direction. I mean, I think they had some interesting stuff in season 4, and I actually really like season 4 as a whole. Um, I don't really start having major issues with the show until 6 or 7. Um, I even like Dawn. I love Riley. I kind of tend, which I know is probably has always been an unpopular opinion, but yeah, I mean, the Initiative was kind of not the best, but it had a great finale, season 4. I mean, Restless was awesome.
oh yeah, it set everything up for the next couple seasons.
Yeah, and even the episode right before, which I cannot remember the name of the episode right off the top of my head, where she faces Adam and she kind of has that moment where she, has that Matrix moment where she puts her hands up and the bullets turn and they turn into doves. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was such a cool scene, and you know, and that's another thing. How many shows are there where you know episode titles offhand anymore?
Not many anymore. I mean, I don't think they even aired the episode titles at the beginning of the episodes, though, right?
No, it's just, but it
Um,
was just that type of show
but
that everybody was
but
so
yeah,
into.
you
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 knew it.
you got the episode titles later, and you're like, oh, have you seen Hush? Have you seen The Body? Have you seen Once More with Feeling?
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
I think it's the Iron Team now that I think about it. The episode before Restless, but
but there's so many, and yeah, season 4. While I didn't like the main story arc,
mhm.
there were so many strong
Yeah, I
episodes
mean,
and character development, character building episodes in that season
yeah,
where like you can't just skip it
no.
because you'd miss too
And it's
much.
also fun to finally see her in the college setting. It's something different where she's been in high school the first 3, and it's this whole new world. And I mean, but it's interesting because the first episode, which is the freshman, where they set up Sunday, who's that vampire blonde villain, and she was so
Hmm.
awesome, and then she dies at the end of it, and you're kind of like, oh well, she was somewhere like almost like a female Spike, where she was kind of like
Yep.
sassy and snarky, and she. And they set it up. I love that episode. But yeah, I mean, they make some missteps, but I also think that's sort of like the college thing. I mean, the whole thing with her, with the one night stands with Adam, not Adam, Adam's the actor's name. Oh my gosh, what's his name? It's gonna
Yeah, I don't
drive me
remember
nuts. But yeah, Adam is the villain. But her Parker, was it Parker?
Parker.
My last name. You think I know? Is it?
Maybe it's not Parker. I don't remember.
Edit this all out.
Maybe Parker was an initiative guy. I can't remember.
Yeah, but her whole one night stand with a guy in season 4, and she's so heartbroken. I mean, that's again those experiences we have as we're growing up, and they sort of just all kind of translate into this supernatural world. And I just feel like although it's imperfect, it definitely lines up with the overall theme of the season, I think.
Do you have a underrated character
besides Riley?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, you can say Riley. Well, it's okay.
I do. I mean, it's kind of
Riley gets a lot of hate.
He gets a lot of hate, and I'm kind of biased because I love Mark Lucas. When he first started on the show, I actually, like a freakazoid, found him on AOL one night and started talking to him. Yeah, and he was talking about how he was great in the show, and we used to chat online. It's very strange, and I actually met him later at a movie premiere, and it was definitely him. So it's not like I was being catfished in 2004 or whatever. But he was such a nice guy, and I love that Riley is just a nice guy, and that just doesn't work in her world, and that's why it doesn't work. Even though he was initiative and he wasn't straight like this regular guy, he kind of just he was, and that's why he was. There's that darkness in her, which he didn't really get, and they weren't really ever going to work out. But I thought he was a really good character. I liked his little scenes with Willow. I thought he was. I think he got a lot of guff. People didn't like him because he was boring, but that's kind of what you want her to have. You want her to, at some point, have a normal guy. And it's the same thing. I know you watched True Blood, right?
I did for a few seasons.
Okay. So just the same thing with Sookie, where at the end of the show, she winds up with this, spoiler alert, but she winds up with this guy we never even meet or see, but he's just some regular guy. Because at the end of the day, you don't want her to be with a vampire werewolf. You just want her to have a good life and not have this craziness. And that was with Buffy, the same thing. So I do like him. I even like Dawn, because again, I think a lot of times we criticize characters for what they're meant to be. She was meant to be the bratty sister, And so, is she bratty? Did she get dropped out of nowhere? Yes, but that's what the plot needed. And I think she's interesting. I love that scene with her and Xander, where he tells her, where she thinks she was going to be the Slayer, but she finds out she wasn't. And he tells her that she's extraordinary. Amazing, but not a coupley type amazing. That was a brother, sister, dad, daughter type of moment, not whatever. But
definitely like a big brother.
Yeah.
Kind
of. It just didn't. It was so nice, and I really love the rapport that the characters have with each other. So I'm gonna, although there's a lot that I love Riley and I love Dawn. And I don't love them as a favorite character, but I just feel like they get a lot of hate. But yeah, I mean, because I feel like there's someone who loves Anya, there's someone who loves Tara, there's someone who loves Willow, for to say an underrated character, it's kind of hard because they're so good. You have to go to the ones that people hate, sort of.
Yeah.
I mean,
or you go for the ones that only show up for 2 or 3 episodes and then they're done.
I love Amy. Okay. She's cool, I guess. But can I say a character that I think is overrated?
Sure.
You probably could already tell, but my reactions is Spike.
I definitely. I'll preface it that I like Spike as a villain.
Yes.
I like Spike as a foil for Buffy and Angel. Yes. I even like Spike chipped as an ally. I do not like Spike with a soul. And I do not like Spike with Buffy.
No. And that's it. I mean, as he is, he's fine. But I still, to this day, have such a problem with Buffy. I have such a problem with it. And the fact that they really kind of, in a way, ended on that ship just really was I love the finale. That was my only qualm with it. Although I think they did it really beautifully, how he sacrificed himself. And he kind of knew she maybe didn't totally mean she loved him. That was nice. But I just get hives every time people talk about how they love Buffy, because to me it's just such a destructive relationship, and that's the main character. I don't want her to be with the guy who tries to rape her. I don't want her to be with a guy who's having sex with her and saying, look at all your friends and they don't know you and disconnect. And he was just such a bad influence for her. And I mean, I understand that's season 6. That's not all of it, but I don't know.
Right.
I just get very irritated with Spike stuff. And I think I met James Marsters once and I told him that and he was kind of like, yeah, I agree. So that was interesting. But people still love it to this day. And I'm like, dude, he tried to rape her. Like, how do you get back on board that? I don't get it.
Well, I think it's almost lining up with another character that's gotten really popular lately as we diverge from the Whedonverse for a second, with Harley Quinn and her relationship with the Joker. And people are like, I love Harley Quinn. I love her and the Joker together. And it's like the Joker doesn't love her. He drove her insane. He has made it to the point where she's infatuated with him. He's physically and mentally abusive to her. Why?
Yeah.
Why would you like that relationship at all?
Yeah, I mean, and there's something interesting to be said story-wise for it, where you can be like, okay, that's kind of interesting how it plays out. But I would never be like, oh, I love them together, and people still do that. And I mean, I had back in the day so many fights online about it because I was like, yeah, no, that's done, that's dead for me. People just looked past it to the point where, especially now, where I think we're a little bit more verbally aware. Like we talk about rape and the way it's used in television. I mean, look at what Game of Thrones got. You know, the discussion there.
Absolutely.
But back then, it's like you know, he goes from trying to rape her in one episode, and the next episode, people want them back together, and I'm like, what's going on? I don't get it. And I understand, like, you know, it's not him, you know, because he, whatever. I just get irritated still, and that is like my biggest qualm with the show. It was that direction that they went in, and yeah, and it's still such a big thing. I mean, Buffy is still, people just die for it, and I'm just like, no, thank you.
Yeah, that, and it's as I said earlier, it's still going on in the comics, so
yeah, that's why I figured when
whatever.
you heard me go like, oh, you might have guessed that I'm not a fan, but I mean, James Marsters great. I mean, that's a great character. It's just the way that they used him at times was not a fan of.
Yeah,
but I don't mean to be so negative, but that's just always the one thing that I'm just like, oh, if I have to complain about anything about Buffy besides the last season, yeah, that's it.
So we got your favorite character, and overrated, underrated. You got to have a favorite episode.
I do, and it has been like a long debate in my head because I have a tie. Can I make a tie?
You can make
Thank
a tie.
you.
Listen, you're the guest.
I can do
You can
whatever.
make a tie or not have a tie.
Excellent.
I'm not giving you grades
Because I
here.
go back and forth about which one's my favorite, and I think it's between Prophecy Girl and Innocence. Those are just, I mean, they're brilliant. I mean, both, and at the core of each of them, when I think about them, I think about Buffy and Giles and the conversations they have in each of those episodes. You know, where she goes in Prophecy Girls and she says, I'm 16 years old, I don't want to die. That scene. And then I think about an Innocence where he's in the car with her and he's kind of just trying to console her. I love their relationship. It's just, Giles is just, can I say Giles for underrated too? Okay,
Yeah.
let's go back in time. Giles for underrated too, because maybe it's because now I'm like almost the same age as he was when he first started the show, which is crazy. But I mean, those 2 episodes, man, they were just some of the best TV ever. And I mean, of course, The Body and Hush and Restless, you know, and those episodes, they're great too. But there's nothing like those 2 episodes for me.
It's always interesting whenever you see like a BuzzFeed article or one of those articles that pops up on entertainment websites, and they're like, look at the top 10 Buffy episodes, and it's almost always the exact same episodes, just out of order. And it's like, yeah, pretty much those are up there.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there's even like you know, one episode I have to watch again because people talk about how it's like so amazing, and I wasn't that impressed, which was Conversations with Dead People.
I remember that,
season
and
7, I think.
It was season 7, and it was the one where they had tried to get Amber Benson to reprise her role as Tara, and I think she would not, and they went with this character that had been around for like 1 or 2 episodes to be, and that was the one thing that really turned me off on the episode, was was Amber Benson not being there as Tara.
Yeah, but
I mean, obviously not her fault,
yeah, and I
but
understand why she said she didn't want to do it. She didn't want to leave the last episode with Tara to be in a place where she was something malevolent. Like she's
mm-hmm.
such a kind and good character that for her to come back in some sort of twisted first, evil way, But I don't know. Everyone talks about that one being so amazing, and I'm like, oh, it was good. But I mean, it's such a great show that even if, the kind of like middling episodes nobody ever talks about, I still think they're like awesome TV, like Buffy versus Dracula. Or,
Oh man, that's an episode that I need to rewatch because I remember just laughing so much during that episode.
yeah, I mean, it was just fun, or like something like Homecoming, season 2, or even like just if you could name like 50 episodes that they never make a list and they're still great. Earshot. I mean, I guess Earshot shows up on the list. I love Who Are You with Faith and Buffy and Faith. I mean, the Faith storyline was amazing. I think my favorite villain is the mayor. I love Glory too, though, because she was just crazy. It's just so I really didn't feel like the show went downhill until like season 7. Season 6, sort of, but season 7, like I don't think I ever rewatched a single episode except for the finale. And I really kind of feel like I should because that's rare, but it just didn't feel right.
Why do you think that is? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know. I think I really like the idea of the Slayers and everything. It's not the storyline. I like the idea of the first evil. I just don't think the show is firing on all its cylinders at that point. I don't know. Was Joss like still really involved with the show at that point?
I don't think
Yeah,
so.
it just felt like it.
And it felt like there were things that were missing because there was a lot more where it was like, well, why didn't anyone say anything about X, Y, or Z? Like, you'd have these storylines that would come up, and you're like, they really should have been on top of this more with all their experience and all their stuff going on. The characters should have been more aware at some points.
Yeah.
Or like the storylines, even with themselves, like even within the characters, didn't feel right. Like turning on Buffy.
Yeah.
That was a big thing. Like, you are turning on Buffy.
I don't even remember why they did that. It was just I also felt like so many of the episodes felt the same. Like I couldn't tell you the difference between 5 different episodes. There wasn't that much new story. And I don't know. It just something felt. I mean, I didn't like Kennedy. I don't think that's probably one character that nobody liked.
There's a character that nobody likes.
Yeah, not even me. And it's nothing against the fact that Willow had a new girlfriend, or it's nothing against that it's not Tara. It just was just a character that was sort of a dud. But I don't know. I really feel like I want to go back and rewatch that season because I don't remember it. I can't even really feel like I can have a conversation about it in depth. Like, I don't even remember why they were mad at Buffy, but you're right. That was ridiculous. Oh, wait. Didn't Faith come back and do something?
Faith did come back, and they decided to throw in with her because Buffy was either doing too much with Spike or like she wasn't being proactive enough in the fight. And Faith was like, oh, let's take it to him. Let's do X, Y, and Z. And then it ends up being Faith leading a whole bunch of them into this, basically a trap.
Caleb.
Yep.
Yeah, which was interesting to see Nathan Fillion as a full-on villain. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was unfortunate that it ended on a down point for me, but at least it kind of, I think they realized that it was going downhill a bit, and they ended it, and they really had an awesome finale. Like, I have no problems with the finale. I really think they just did such a great job. I love how they ended it with them just looking out, and unless you read the comics, you can imagine what comes next.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, nothing's ever gonna touch it. I love shows so much right now, and like I don't think there's ever gonna be a point where something else is my favorite show. That's it. It's like carved in stone for all time. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She saved my world a lot.
And I think that's how you and I became friends.
I think so.
But I can't remember.
No, I know. It's like we were friends.
It's so long ago. I'm like, we became friends, I think, from Buffy, like a Buffy community on LiveJournal or something.
And I made icons and stuff, like little 100 by 100 graphics and fanfic and all that stuff I had time for when I was like 19, 20.
So let's move on. We've covered Buffy.
Yes.
At the end of season 3 of Buffy, our somewhat hero, Angel, departs Sunnydale for the even darker place of Los Angeles.
Yes.
Did you like the first season?
I did. I really, again, I want to go back and watch it because I don't remember it so vividly anymore. It's been so long. But I really did. I mean, it definitely was working out its kinks. But I liked it. And, I'm glad they did that with Angel because you can only have him around so long before things get stale or forced with him and Buffy. And I liked that they separated it and it was a little bit more of an adult feel. But I did. I liked it. I liked the whole series. For what it was. I don't think I've rewatched it as much as I rewatched Buffy. But I really like the dynamic that he had with Cordelia. I like how she grew as a character. I love Wesley. I love talk about a character who changed 180 from
talk about the character that he is this British watcher for Faith, basically inept, and he grows to become one of the most dynamic, interesting characters that you are watching on TV.
Yes, a rogue demon hunter.
He is like, I remember when they announced that he was going to be on the show, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" But the growth that he had over the seasons of Angel was just something just so incredible. He is probably, if not my favorite, like of the Buffy and Angel characters, he is probably number 2 or 3 of my favorites.
I think he's my favorite on Angel, definitely. Yeah. And it also just felt authentic. Like it didn't feel forced for someone to make such a change. Like, when he showed up to Angel, he was still that dork. Like I said, the demon hunter trying to like fake it. But just as it evolved, I mean, he just changed. And I mean, where he ended up, the finale, so good.
Well, let's talk about a character that was gone too soon.
Cordelia?
Doyle.
Okay, I was like Cordelia?
Doyle. But I guess Doyle. No, Doyle.
Yes.
I loved Doyle, and I know he was a stand-in for Whistler.
Yes.
Because I don't think either they couldn't get him to do the show, something along those lines, so they created Doyle, and I love Doyle.
He was fun. I mean, he was kind of definitely the comic relief season 1. And he was sort of like you didn't know whether or not to trust him, and that was interesting. But I know the actor, he's died, right? He died.
Yeah, he did pass away.
I think that they kind of wrote him out because of the problems he was having, which it's such a shame. I mean, going back to Buffy with Nicholas Brendan, the same thing, the knowing that an actor that you like so much is dealing with these demons that are just so dangerous. But I think that they wrote him out because of the problems that he was having in his own life. But yeah, it was kind of disappointing because he was such a great character. He did have a great send-off where he, had this one heroic moment before he went. But not to disparage him, I think the show kind of was better after he left. Because I think he was that. I mean, they all have. I think they found the comedy in the characters that aren't outright comedic. Like Cordy would be funny, and Wesley would be funny, and Angel in his own way would be funny. But they didn't need that sort of Whistler / Xander-like character to be the comic relief, and it sort of let everybody else come up to the plate on that.
And not only that, it allowed Cordelia to be more involved than answering telephones or looking stuff up.
Yeah, and it also strengthened her as a character because that was probably, the moment where she really grew up. Was with his death. I haven't thought about Doyle in so long. Yeah. He was definitely a great character, but I do think the show probably got better once he left. Not because of him, but it's just like I can't go back and be like, oh, I wish Doyle was around for the whole 5 seasons because it was so good despite...
Well, what's interesting is that storyline that Doyle was a part of, and I'm going to try and refresh your memory.
Thank you.
Like they had that demon army that was forming, and it was going to like lay waste, is like rounding up demons that weren't going to be a part of it. They never followed up on it, ever.
Yeah, and I think that's probably because of the problems with the actor. Unfortunately, they get forced into a spot. God, I don't even remember that. I really need to just go sit back and watch all these again. It's been too long.
Just add it to your
I added
list.
to my list. I'm a teacher, so I've had the summer off, but I've been catching up on shows or watching new shows. It's like there's only so many hours in the day, sadly.
So, Angel, 5 seasons. Which is your favorite? Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite character? I mean, do you have a favorite character?
I mean, Wesley's my favorite character.
Wesley's your favorite.
I really love the Illyria episodes when
Okay.
they're just so heartbreaking. When Wesley, when Fred's sick and she dies and she becomes Illyria, which is a hole in the world, I think it's called, and shelves, if I remember correctly. Those two were just heartbreaking. And I really loved Tashansu in LA, which was the first season finale, I believe. But such a good show too. I mean, there's so many side characters in that, like Lorne, which another actor, unfortunately, who passed away. He was such a great character. I really thought Lindsay was interesting. I liked Kate. I liked Connor. I'm telling you, I tend to like all these characters nobody likes. I think, that Illyria arc was powerful. What am I talking about? I'm skipping my favorite episode, and I cannot remember the name, but it's the one where Darla gives birth to Connor.
Okay.
That one, favorite. So good. Where she's in the alley, and she gives birth, and in order to save the baby, she stakes herself.
Yep.
Oh, so good. And that's, again, a character where you kind of hated Darla, and that whole arc where she has her humanity. So good. How about you?
As far, are we talking characters or seasons?
Whatever you want. You're the host.
I'm the host. As far as seasons go, I don't know if I really have a favorite because it's been so long since I've watched the series. I just remember pieces and fragments. I really like the slow addition of side characters, especially characters like Gunn, where Gunn shows up for an episode, and then 2 episodes later, there's Gunn again. And they how they slowly integrate the characters into the group, how it's natural. Same with Lorne. And Lorne really, he was part of the group, but he was separate except until they blew up his lounge. And I'm trying to decide whether I like them more in their office or at the hotel. Just because the hotel kind of seemed a bit too big for them.
Yeah.
At times, you've got a hotel in Los Angeles and no one is really asking about it so much. But I will tell you that the storyline that I hated was the one with Gina Torres.
Yeah, the Jasmine storyline.
Jasmine, and here's the reason why. She's supposed to be this powerful person. Her sphere of influence is huge, yet obviously Buffy's going on at the same time. Nothing's affected in Sunnydale. No one's talking about it. It's just, it felt really just weird. And I wish if they were doing it on Angel and the way that it was projected, that it should have carried over somewhat into Buffy.
No, I agree, but that's always the trap you fall into with having these shows or movies in the same verse. Like with Captain America and Avengers, anytime there's a standalone movie, why isn't Thor showing up? If the world's coming to an end, you think that, Hulk would show up, and you sort of have to sort of disconnect a little bit your reasoning. I always make the joke that, sometimes people over criticize things, and I say, do you watch Godzilla? And say, well, lizards don't get that big, Sometimes you have to just real, not be so, not that I'm saying you're being critical, but, it's just they can't always just what's the word, they can't always match up because logistically it just doesn't work that way. But yeah, I just think it just wasn't very well done, and too bad because Gina Torres is amazing, but it was just kind of silly. But
I will say that some of my favorite episodes are the ones where Wesley is skirting whether he's good, whether he's bad, that whole where he's not a part of the team, but you still see him on the periphery doing things, either to help them or to advance their cause.
Right.
Always were, those were really good episodes. Wasn't much a fan of the Cordelia Angel relationship, but, I mean, It is what it is. I just don't see Angel being with anybody,
But
but
Buffy.
that's me.
But
Oh
Buffy or no?
no, not even with
Oh,
Buffy.
okay.
I just always felt like he would be alone, one of those guys. He's the warrior of light kind of character,
He
and
needs love too.
well, his love can get him into trouble.
Yes, but still, he deserves it. But yeah, I kind of liked Angel Cordelia, but I didn't love it. Like I was, because again, I think Angel, if any Angel's gonna be with anyone, he's gonna be with Buffy. But again, different shows, they can't be blah blah. Blah. I
Hmm.
liked that the relationship that they had. I don't know if it was so much romantic, and but I was willing to at least buy in to it being romantic for the sake of it, But I was just all about Wesley Fred. That was that show for me.
Oh, I loved Wesley Fred. I love Fred,
Oh, she's hilarious. I mean,
and her addition to the show was just great to begin with, coming from a character that's been trapped in this other world for years, and then to have her integrate back into regular living, plus like what she's doing now. I mean, she's just so great.
yeah, and I mean Amy Acker, I love her. She pops up on different things, and I really do want to watch everything that these ex Buffy people have been, or Buffyverse, Whedonverse, I guess, people have been in. But it gets to be too much. But I love her. She's just amazing. I don't know. Did you see Much Ado About Nothing, Joss Whedon's version?
I did
You
not.
should. It's very good because it's her and Alexis Denisof is the romantic foils in this movie, and a bunch of different Whedonverse people, and it was just kind of like this moment of being like, oh, Wesley and Fred again. It was sweet. But
I'll have to check it out then.
yeah, it's very good, and it's black and white, and it's very Joss Shakespeare, which is strange. But
So we have Buffy, we have Angel, which sadly finished.
yes,
I think, and I remember being so upset that it was on the WB at the time, right?
uh, did it or did it finish
Or
on
was it
UPN? Or
CW? I can't
UPN
remember.
was between the two.
Well, it was on the it's whatever the channel Vampire Diaries is on.
CW, yeah.
CW. Okay, so it's on the CW, and I remember being so upset that they canceled Angel to start a new vampire show. And I can't remember if it's the vampire. It might have been even something else, a different vampire show.
It might.
But
Vampire Diaries, I think, is in its like. I'm looking at my DVDs. Like seventh, eighth season now. Eighth season it's going into. So that sounds about right, right? Angel's been off for about 8 years.
I think so. But I remember being so upset because it's like here you have a proven TV show about vampire stuff going on, and you are canceling it for a new show that you have no clue what it's going to do.
They could have two at the same time.
Exactly.
But
there's room for two vampires.
I also think it ended strong and had that kind of like, I still don't know what I think about the ending, that it was so open. Although, again, I know they continued it in the comics, which kind of takes that away. Because at the end of the finale, you don't know if they're like, you kind of get the feeling they're going to die. Like, Gunn's going to die, Wesley's dead, like they're going into this fight they can't win, and it goes to black. And that's very kind of cool. And I kind of hated it and loved it at the same time. And I think there's a comic after that, so I think Gunn lives, and they kind of ruin the.
Yeah, Gunn.
Not that I don't want Gunn to live.
Technically, he in the comic, which is a wackadoodle comic to begin with, Gunn gets turned into a vampire, and like Los Angeles goes to hell literally, and is divided into like fiefdoms under different demons, and like Angel starts trying to clean it up, and then at the end of like that comic run, they kind of just eliminate it, or say they make like not a wish, but something happens to where all of that never happened, and but then there's like certain repercussions after that.
I do love that with the comics that they can do the things that would be financially ridiculous to do on a TV show.
Like Angel riding on a dragon.
Okay, yeah, sure, like that. You should cross over to Game of Thrones. That'd be interesting. But but yeah, I mean, because I've heard like some of the stuff like with Giant Dawn, right, and Buffy. Like,
yep, Giant Dawn and Buffy.
Okay, but I mean, just logistically for a TV show, it would be like, okay, I guess they could do it, but splitting the city in two fiefdoms of demons sounds a little expensive. So it's kind of cool that they did that in the comics. But again, I kind of wish they had just left it. Although people want the continuation, so I don't blame them. But I thought that was a cool ending.
Yeah, the ending was definitely frustrating though. I remember watching it and being like, "No, don't end it like this. I need it to be solid. I don't want open-ended endings."
Yeah, but it was definitely risky, and I liked it as much as I hated it. So that's good.
And then we get Firefly.
Yes, and Firefly,
which
I did not watch when it was first on.
Me too. I remember I was in college at the time, and I had downloaded some of the episodes, and I'd never watched them. Like I deleted them. I was like, oh, I'm not going to watch this show. And I don't remember what it was or when I got into it, but I remember watching the first episode and then marathoning or binging basically the rest of the season, like the whole season all at once. And I don't remember when I did that. And to find out like how Fox had treated it
Fox.
by telling them what they wanted, how to do their episodes. No, I want this episode to be first and then this episode to be second, and not showing them in order, or even like bumping them around the schedule. But those 13 episodes are wonderful, and I try to show whoever I can and get them into Firefly.
I think when it first aired, it was on Friday nights, and I think I went out for some reason, and I said, Mom, can you tape this for me? And she didn't. And I was like, well, I guess I'm just not watching that show. And it was something as silly as that I just didn't get into it when it first started. Or maybe it was in college. I don't remember. But again, same thing as you. I sort of just marathoned it all and loved it. And I think as much as it stinks that it wasn't continued outside of Serenity, which I love the movie, I think it's almost nice that it's this little bit of perfection that can never be tarnished. Some shows are so brilliant and then they kind of start to go downhill. It's like, oh, but this is just 12, 13 episodes of perfection.
Yeah. 13 episodes in the movie.
Yeah. I know, there's always a lot of people wanting to bring it back. I think that ship has probably sailed, unfortunately. But it was excellent. And it was just, again, so many characters and they were all great. I loved Kaylee. She was probably my favorite character.
Yep, right there with you.
I think I like the characters who feel like a real person the most, and are kind of funny. That's like the Xander sort of. I guess the Xander of Firefly is Wash, but to be fair, but I don't know. Kaylee was just. I love that she's this girl and she defies your gender expectations. She's the mechanic and she's feminine, but kind of like a badass too. And she's just so funny. And Jewel Staite's great, another actress who keeps popping up on things I watch, and I'm always so happy when she does.
And she just got married.
Congrats. But yeah, you know how you talk about how you just want to show everybody Firefly? That's all I want. My dating ad should just be looking for a male, age, whatever to whatever. Will watch Firefly and marathon all my favorite TV shows with me. That's honestly, that's what I feel like I should just put on my dating profiles. I would probably get no responses, but it would be the most honest
nowadays.
Thing. Yeah, that would be the most honest ad. Please watch all my shows with me. What
was it about Firefly that you loved?
I think it was just part of it was that it was just so different. Again, I think you said this too. The idea of it being a Western and a space Western was just kind of not really my thing, and the idea of it being a space Western is hilarious. But it was different. I love the little touches of how they spoke Chinese. I love the interplay between the characters. I love the strong females. Zoe was amazing for the second to be the strong female, and Kaylee was great, and Inara was kind of interesting. And yeah, they didn't do enough with her, and I think that's probably where they could still fix the show, if anything. I think they probably just. I think one of your previous guests said this, that they kind of just used her as a foil for Mel.
Yeah.
A little too much, and she didn't really have enough of her own storyline. But and Morena Baccarin's great. She, again, she keeps showing up on all my shows, but it was just a little bit of everything. I mean, really, there's not a character there that you're just like, oh, yeah, I don't really like them so much. I mean, I guess Book, because he's the older character, is the
Hmm.
most exciting. But I mean, for me to list my favorite characters, for Jane to be like second from last, it's not that I don't like him. It's just that all the other characters are so great, you know?
Right.
And
Yeah. I mean, and that's the beauty of it being just the one season with whatever it is, the 7 or 8 characters. They're all pretty great.
yeah, and I love River. I love how the movie ended with her in the driver's that's not driver, you know, in the ship
Yeah,
with
the
Mal.
pilot.
Thank you, the pilot with Mal. I mean, it's just she she was such a cool character. The way what Summer Glau brought with the ballet and the fighting. I mean, that scene in Serenity where she takes out everybody. At
Hmm.
the two scenes in Serenity like that. I mean, the fact that she had that ballet experience um, just made the choreography just so much more interesting. It was really, like I said, I like, at least if I can, you know, try and put that silver lining on it, it's this little bit of perfection that will never be tainted. And they could have a chance to ruin it with the movie, but the movie was great too, and it was the perfect in if you didn't watch the show. And
Right.
I took like my dad, I took my best friend, I was like, come on, we're going, and they hadn't seen it and they loved it, and I was so sad that that movie did not do better box office wise, because if it had, I think that would have opened the door to more for Firefly, but it didn't. It's a tough sell. I think it would do better
Hmm.
now. Like if it was a
Oh,
Netflix show, I mean, please.
oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And I think I talked about this with one of my other guests about if it came back on Netflix,
yeah,
it would be amazing.
yeah. Because I think that the biggest risks that are being taken in television are not on Fox, basically, or on any of the ABC, CBS, CW, any of those. It's all Netflix or HBO or Hulu,
Showtime or Star.
Showtime.
Yeah. I mean, all of those pay channels or subscription channels are the ones taking those risks with their shows that they're making.
Yeah, and that's why I'm kind of sad that Joss doesn't seem to be doing much, because I feel like if he started a new show now, it would just be amazing. And he has so many more opportunities of places where the show would survive and where it
Hmm.
would flourish, but he doesn't seem to be doing much. And I get it. I'm sure he's tired. But I feel like there's
Oh,
that untapped
yeah.
brilliance out there right now.
So I know I talked with another person about another Whedon show,
Dollhouse. Yeah,
Dollhouse. Yes.
you don't watch it, but you're going to.
I haven't watched it yet. I have not kept up my promise to my previous guest
Yeah.
Andy about watching it. Uh, did you watch
I
it?
did, and I liked it a lot. I didn't like love it like I did the other Whedon shows. I think it took a while to find itself, and I think it was because of network interference.
Hmm.
But it wound up, once it started kind of like kicking into gear, it was really great. And the concept, which I know your previous guest explained, so I won't repeat it, was just really interesting, with these people being blank slates and whatever they wanted to be. And it was just really interesting. And I'm going to totally, was it Andy, echoing her,
Yeah.
because she was totally right that Sierra and Victor were just the best part of that show. That's the couple that she talked about where they were just kind of drawn to each other.
Hmm.
But I mean, it's really good. Eliza Dushku's in it, and she's great. And I know you're a Battlestar Galactica fan, so Tom O'Pennickett's in it, who played Hilo. He
Yep.
was the male lead on the show. Amy Acker's in it. I mean, it's short enough where I feel like it's not asking you too much to watch it. So I might make you double promise on top of Andy's promise to watch it. Double promise,
Double swear. Double
double
pinky
pinky
swear.
swear. But it's really a very good show. And did you watch Agent Carter?
No.
Okay. I was gonna say the guy, I'm gonna totally butcher his name, but Enver Jokaj was the guy who plays Victor, and he's on Agent Carter.
Okay.
You probably will recognize him because he pops up in a lot of things, but
Hmm.
it's a really good show. It definitely felt like a show that, probably the reason why it's Joss's last TV show fully is because you feel like you feel the manipulation, and then you finally kind of feel where he knew it was done. In the second season, he just kind of did his show that he wanted to do, even though it was not what the network wanted. But
Right.
it's definitely interesting. I definitely, probably of the TV shows that Will Joss did, my least favorite, but that is, you know,
That's saying
That's
something.
saying something. I mean, my least favorite still, I really, really enjoyed it. So I don't have too much to say on it, besides basically echoing what your previous guest said. I love Sierra Victor. I love the different ways they use these ciphers, basically these blank people for different things. And it has kind of cool mythology. And I won't spoil it, so because you double pinky swore to watch it. But it was great. It was really interesting. And I love Eliza Dushku, too. And she was really good in all these different personas that she was given.
I mean, I told Andy I would watch it. And I'm going to tell you, with my double pinky swear, I'm going to watch it.
Thank you.
So
I think every guest should make you, like, up that promise. Like, you'll be like, I quadruple pinky swear.
I quadruple pinky
Just leave
swear
me
that I will
alone.
watch
I'll watch it
Dollhouse
now.
next.
Like I said, it's short enough because it was only 2 seasons, and I think it was 2 short seasons, that it's doable. And I mean, you kind of have to be a Joss completist, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Which I was going to ask. So, Buffy, Angel, Firefly, Dollhouse, is that your Whedonverse completionist?
Nope.
Like, nope.
No.
Okay.
No, I have 2 more.
Okay.
Besides Much Ado About Nothing, which I liked it. I haven't watched it twice, but I have 2 things which I adore, which Joss Whedon did, and nobody's talked about yet, which is Dr. Horrible. Dr. Horrible's sing-along vlog. Yeah, I mean, it's great. I'm heartbroken he has not done a sequel yet. I don't know what the deal is with that, but it was so good. And it's like classic Joss, where they, like, break your heart into a gajillion pieces. I love it. It's called getting jossed when you, like, get your favorite character killed now. It's like it's a verb in fandom. Like, oh, she got jossed, but I love Dr. Horrible. I think it was so much fun when that came out because it was something new for something to release online.
And not only that was during the writer's strike, wasn't it?
I believe
so.
Yeah.
No new shows were coming out, and that's why it was released online. And I think that's why everything, the way that they did it was, with the digital release and whatnot, was due to that.
Yeah.
It was something where they could skirt around the issue and just get it done in that little small time frame that they had.
Yeah. And I mean, it was so great. I mean, the story was so genuinely funny. The music was great. I mean, it was like watching Once More with Feeling 2, him writing these funny songs again. Nathan Fillion's hilarious. I mean, Neil Patrick Harris, breaks your heart. Felicia Day's just a sweet penny. It was great. I really hope someday he picks it up again. I don't know if that's going to happen. But that's one. And then my other one, which is one of my favorite movies, it is the movie that when I have time, I watch on Halloween every year, is Cabin in the Woods.
Oh, I totally forgot about that. And I remember when that came out in the movie theater, and I don't know if the marketing failed or if they had no marketing. But I remember when they were making it, and it's like, oh, Joss Whedon and
Tracy Greenberg, I believe.
You're right. How they were doing that movie, and I don't remember if I watched it on Netflix or I got a DVD copy. How incredibly original that movie was.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem with the marketing, is that to market it, you can't market it as what it is. You market it as what it's kind of like making a comment on. Like, it's totally a commentary on horror films. So you have this ad for it. It's like, oh, there's a cabin in the woods, and these, teenagers going out and drinking and getting high, and then something happens, and that's what it's kind of making fun of. But when you market it, it looks like it's just another one of those movies, and it's very easy for those to kind of get, swept under the rug and not be interesting. But look, again, I feel like Joss is so ahead of his time, because look who's in that movie now that is huge, which is Chris Hemsworth. If he had come out a few years later, like if they had sat that on the shelf, like it would have been such a big hit. But I mean, that movie is just crazy. I remember I saw it in theaters, and I was just like, when it's really, I mean, the whole movie's brilliant, but that ending, when the elevator scene onward, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, because if you haven't seen it, you really should. But it just becomes the craziest movie ever, and it's hilarious and gross, and just, I love it so much. Like, I want to put in a little heart bubble. And I'm not a big horror movie fan. I like some. Like, my other favorite is Drag Me to Hell, which is I think a Sam Raimi film, and that's my Halloween. When I have time on Halloween, I watch Cabin in the Woods and Drag Me to Hell. But that movie's just, it's so like, you could just tell it came from like the twisted mind of Joss and Druzy Greenberg and that whole team. It's just crazy. I love it.
You know what cracks me up about that movie is now when I watch it, I skip the cabin in the woods parts of the movie and just do the other parts that I won't mention.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I because I find those more interesting. And I again, and I've mentioned this on a lot of my different episodes now. I love backstory and I love world building,
Mm.
and I would love to know more
Oh, yeah.
about everything.
Yeah.
And I know, and I'm gonna just jump back to Doctor Horrible and with Cabin in the Woods. There's been talk for both of those of having sequels,
Mm.
and I don't know where they are in the process. And I remember is either Joss or Drew Z. Greenberg was talking about how they wouldn't do a sequel for Cabin in the Woods unless something actually made sense
Yeah.
because of how it ended.
Yeah, you would have to have an interesting twist there. Kind of, but
Right.
again, a prequel would be interesting because it's such an interesting setup. And it's funny because I really don't want to spoil the movie because I feel like it's one that a lot of people haven't seen, and the joy of that twist
The joy
is
of
that whole
watching
movie.
it.
Like that's what makes what makes that movie brilliant. But a
Absolutely.
prequel would be good. Yeah. And then there's also Agents of Shield, which he sort of peripherally does. I like it. I don't
Hmm.
love it, but I think that's pretty much it for Joss.
And he's had his hand in a lot. Like before Buffy, he was one of those screen
Yeah, he
doctors
did Toy
where
Story,
he did Toy Story, he
Alien.
did Alien, he did a lot of them. Like where you're looking at it, and he's made comments before of, oh well, the only thing they kept was like this one
And
line.
X-Men with that Halle Berry's
Right.
awful line that she delivered like Shakespeare. He complains.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, he's such a great writer, and I love that he just twists things, and he loves to play with tropes and preconceptions. I mean, the whole idea of Buffy coming from the idea of like this blonde girl who's usually going down an alley and getting attacked, being able to fight back. Um,
Hmm.
I admire him so much. And I love Avengers. How can we not briefly at least mention that for Joss for Whedonverse? I think he did
Oh
such
my
a great
goodness.
job.
I remember getting into a Facebook fight when he was announced as the director and the person that was kind of going to oversee like the Marvel universe at that point. And they were like, "I can't believe Joss Whedon. He's done nothing." And it's like they've picked probably one of the best people to handle like a team of different backgrounds, different characters, like different motivations. Joss is probably one of those directors and writers where you can definitely tell like he's going to be able to handle the balancing act of those
Yeah, and it's
characters.
all about this major ensemble where you have to let every character shine to a bit. I mean, I guess except for Hawkeye in the first one.
Yeah,
Sorry, Hawkeye, but
sorry, Hawkeye.
sorry, next movie you got your due. But he has the ability to take 10 different cast members and give them all their due, and I really love that he balances comedy and drama. Like there are some genuinely hilarious parts in the Avengers movies, and there are
Hmm.
genuinely like heartbreaking parts too, and it never feels like too much of either one. And I like that levity because as opposed to the DC movies, which are fine, but there's sometimes I just want like a joke to be cracked somewhere in there. Like, okay, everything's dark and bleak and we're all gonna die. Thanks, Batman. I mean, I like them, but I kind of definitely like the Marvel approach better. And he was really great. And I feel like people who criticized him didn't know. If you don't like, he always said like, if you don't want to watch a show called Buffy the Vampire Slayer because of the name, well, you're not invited to the party. That's what he used to say. And it's
Right.
that same thing. People, if you don't know that Buffy is actually an excellent show, you're going to be like, the guy who did Buffy is doing Avengers, and people are just ignorant. Sorry.
Right.
Sorry, people.
Instead of realizing that he also did a run on
Yes, he
X-Men
did the comics, right?
and yeah, and a run on like other comics and has been in the universe like, you know, it's it's you got to look at the whole body of work that he's got, and obviously they're not just going to hand it over to somebody that's not proven or tested or have a vision for what they'd like to do.
Yeah, and I think he did. I mean, I definitely liked the first Avengers more than Age of Ultron. I still really liked Age of Ultron. It just didn't feel as perfect as Avengers. Like Avengers, I think was just. I remember I saw that movie like the first showing in IMAX, and as soon as I got out, I literally was just reconsidering going to see it right again, like getting back online,
Right.
because it was that awesome to me. And the second one was like exciting, and I loved it too. But that first one was perfect.
Well, you know what it is that for a lot of people with these comic book movies, there was a time where we never thought in our lifetime we would get movies like that portrayed the characters as they did. I mean, it came like the X-Men movies, the first one at least, and then even the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. Those were good, but to get a cast of characters like the Avengers and not have it feel forced, like, oh, hey, look, we're doing an Avengers movie, but for the way that they did it with rolling them out as they did, so that way you learn the characters.
And the casting was just really great too. There was no character that you were like, I don't know about them.
You know what cracks me up is, as we talk about this, on my Facebook for the On This Day thing that they have, I had made a comment years ago about the casting of Captain America being Chris Evans. And I was like, but he was the Human Torch. He can't be Captain America.
That's a no-no, sort of, right? A faux pas.
But it worked out perfectly.
I know. An irony of ironies is that today on my time hop, there was a post about me talking about how I was not happy with the casting of Peeta and Gale in the Hunger Games. And I wound up, well, especially Peeta. I loved the casting. So I feel like sometimes we have to like be really patient with casting because it seems like not great. And then they surprise you. Because I remember when Heath Ledger was cast as the Joker, people were like, what? And look, that's one of the most iconic performances of all time.
Or Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner, because I liked Edward Norton as the Hulk. And he was better than
Eric Bana.
Eric Bana.
Yeah. I just like that first Hulk movie because Ang Lee directed it as a comic book, like with panels and everything. So his direction felt like a comic book, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, it was not a good movie.
Man, that was a movie and you and I probably both worked at Blockbuster at the time when that movie came out.
Wow, what a difference.
And I remember having to tell people about the movie. I was like, look, it is not a Hulk smash movie. It is very straight up like science-based with a few Hulk smash parts in it. You are not going to like it if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I didn't hate it. It just wasn't good.
It was very almost like an indie art movie rather than
I don't think
what people are going for.
Yeah, I don't think Ang Lee was probably the right choice to direct a comic book movie, and I love Ang Lee, but yeah, Mark Ruffalo. I mean, I love him. I love his science bro thing with Tony Stark, and now they have Peter Parker in the mix too. It's like they can be science nerds together. It's great.
Oh yeah. So we're done with the Whedonverse now. So we hit
a lot.
The Whedonverse, and we hit
the JJ verse.
The JJ verse.
Yes.
The Abramsverse, as it is, or the JJ verse.
I think just like the two greatest guys in Hollywood. Like there was a cover of Entertainment Weekly once with them both on it, and it was like that was perfection. They're just, I love them.
I'm almost wondering because they've made the transition to feature films for the most part.
Yeah.
Would they ever
collaborate?
Go back? Oh. Well, not collaborate. Would they ever go back to do a TV show at this point?
I could see Joss doing it probably more than I could see JJ Abrams doing it. Because I think JJ Abrams with Star Wars, although I know he's not directing the next one, I just feel like his heart is more in film now. And I feel like Joss, especially that he's kind of like said he's tired and the whole doing Avengers kind of like broke him. I think he would take solace in doing something small again. And I kind of really hope he does. But I also know whenever he doesn't, any of them, especially Joss, because I think JJ has been a little bit more present in TV than he has, the expectations are going to be so high. And I worry that that's a lot on him and that maybe is holding him back. Like, for there to be a new Joss Whedon show, I mean, come on. People would freak. I would.
not only that, they would be, with the way that the internet is now,
Mm,
be really like, that would, if any misstep
yeah.
would be blown up.
Yeah. Going back to that whole how people interact with showrunners, sometimes I just think it's best that they don't. I
Right.
don't think Joss needs to be on Twitter to promote his shows. There's people on Twitter who would interact with him are going to watch his shows no matter what.
Exactly. And the people on Twitter that are already into the Whedonverse would do enough self-promotion for it
Yeah.
to the point where he doesn't need to get involved. And because I remember he got on Twitter for a while and quit. I don't know if he's back on it
Right. I do very briefly
again.
remember that. I just think he's probably the type of person it's not a good fit for. And that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I mostly tweet about, award shows and stuff, but I'm usually too behind on TV and I'm afraid of being spoiled. So I
Hmm.
stay off it.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we wrap this up? Any particular fandom that we might not have touched on that your inner your inner nerd wants to break
I
out?
know. And it's so funny. I love the podcast so much. And this is always like my favorite part because people like bust out those brands and things that I get to talk about. And I was like, what am I going to say? And I was like, I have 4 shows. And then I was like, well, let's tone it down a little bit because I talk a lot. But I kind of do too. 2 shows I love that I feel like people don't watch enough.
Okay.
Okay, I'll be quick. The first one is Bates Motel, which is on A&E. It's going into its
Hmm.
last season. It's brilliant. It's a prequel to Psycho, so it's the whole setting up of how Norman Bates becomes Psycho, and
Right.
the acting on it is like some of the best acting I've ever seen in my life, and it gets hardly any recognition. It's so clever, and it's such a great show. Nestor Carbonell is on it, who's from Lost. So any JJ fans out there, that's a good reason. Um, that's brilliant. And it's just going into the last season, so it's a good time to catch up. And
Okay.
then the other show is called Sense8, and it's on Netflix. Have you heard of it at all?
I have. I actually, that's one of the shows I have on my list of shows to watch. I think, besides the new show on Netflix, Stranger
Yes, which
Things,
I've seen. It is
it
excellent. You should
it
watch.
was Stranger Things, Sense8, and Orphan Black are
Yes.
my 3 most recommended shows right
And I
now.
highly recommend all 3 of those. But Sense8 is only 1 season in. Naveen Andrews is on that, who's from Lost. So I always try and make those connections.
Hmm.
But it's great. It's about these 8 different people who have some sort of like internal mind connection where they can interact with people in their Sense8 circle, basically, and they can kind of take over for those people. Like, so let's say if there's this one character and he gets in a fight. So the girl, there's this Korean woman named Sun. She steps in and she fights for him, but it's not like she becomes him, but like
Hmm.
sort of like in his head, he's her. It's very confusing to
Explain.
explain, but it's really great. And I mean, it's such a diverse cast. I mean, you have um, a boy from an African village who drives around this Jean-Claude Van Damme tour bus. You have a transgender woman from San Francisco. You have a Mexican soap opera action star from Mexico. You have this girl from London. I mean, it's very diverse. A woman from India, a guy from Germany. It's so interesting. It's by the Wachowski. I was going to say the Wachowski brothers, but they are no longer. They're women now.
Right.
So the Wachowskis, and it's just so visually and just plot wise interesting, and they make these really bold choices that you're just like, wow. And I just think it's fascinating, and not a lot of people watch it, and I highly, highly recommend it. And it's only 1 season, so no harm, no foul. So
For now.
those are the
There-
2 of
because
the 4.
I know they're doing a second season.
Yes, I think it starts Christmas on my app, which I keep up with for television. It says that there is a Christmas episode, so I don't know exactly what's going on with that, but that is when it's supposed to. It says Sunday, December 25th, Christmas special.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of an odd thing for the show, but I really recommend it. It was just so different. It really was different. And I'll just drop. Now I thought of another one. 3 other shows. I won't talk about them, but I'll just say watch them. Which is The Leftovers, The 100, and Mom. I'm done.
Okay.
I won't talk, but I'll just say those 3. If you're like, I like this girl, she likes good stuff. Those are 3.
Well, I have to say, Rebecca, that you have probably the record at this point for the longest podcast episode that we've had on Tales from the
I'm
Fandom.
sorry, I never shut up, but it's so much fun to talk about all this stuff, and especially with you.
Well, that we go way back, and we're both at this point now where we don't really have that outlet anymore of fandom as far as message boards or journals or communities, because the way that it has grown and evolved is something that I don't think we're really a part of anymore. Probably more by choice because of negativity or disagreements with, you don't want to get into flame wars or have 100 trolls start piling on you and learn where you live and phone numbers and all that sort of fun stuff at this point.
Yeah, it's also just age too. I think, just as as I got older, it's just harder to spend more time deep in that world, that you just kind of, it's on the periphery and you don't get, and then when you get to go, it's like Disney World, it's like, I'm here, let's talk.
Exactly.
And I love this podcast, and I love what you do. And it's so interesting. Like I said, even when there are no fandoms I know of, I still just listen so intently. And I think you do a great job.
Well, thank you. And obviously, you're going to be coming back because there's so much more that we didn't get to.
We didn't talk about 90 of my other 100 fandoms. Yeah, and I'm going...
Exactly. I mean, we only took care of two major people,
yes.
And that was Joss Whedon and JJ Abrams. I mean, there's so many more.
That's a big chunk, though, but that's good. And I'm going to New York Comic-Con, so maybe I can report back on stuff there.
There you go. Well, I just have to say thank you for this time, and everyone else, take a listen to The Nice Scottish Guy. Please rate and review us on iTunes and do all that fun stuff by subscribing, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.